Okay.
G- Good morning, Scott.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Doing good. Before we start, Scott, uh, I want to make public thank you for you personally. Since we started this, since the first day, Walt emailed me. And if you remember our meeting in Martin Luther's King Day, January 15th, um, you did not leave a moment to help me and support me in this. I can count. I want the people, I want our members to know that even when your wife in the hospital, you did not leave me. Always you give me an advice, forward your minutes of meeting with the history committee, introducing me to the Region 5 Zafar, and furnish me with a lot of information, email, timeline of the establishment, the sections. Even when I have questions to connect me with some people, always you are there. So really, I want to thank you for all this. It's an honor always to work with you. And you are our advisor for the committee. Thank you so much
Well,
for
you're
all what
quite
you have done
welcome.
for us.
Yeah, you're quite
Thank you.
welcome. Uh, I always try to help anyone who is joining our group of volunteers, and certainly the history is one of my particular interest, and so I'm very happy to do what I can to further the history of the IEEE, and of course, certainly for the Lone Star section as well. So I'm happy to be here and happy to participate.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, Cliff mentioned this yesterday, how when you find out that he's with you at the same company, USAA, how you help him, you start pulling him to the meetings and raise him. Thank you so much. Uh, Cliff, before we go into deep details about the establishment of the Lone Star section, I have a question. Maybe I did not share with you before. Why did you think of that? What motivate you to be the main engineer of splitting from the Central Texas section?
I'm not sure I completely understood the question.
Well, I'm asking what motivate you to start thinking of having our own section in San Antonio?
Okay. Well, actually, the group that you have already interviewed, over the years, we had, had various chats about breaking off and forming our own section. And what really motivated me at this particular point in time was things had developed to the point that it really looked like it was timely to give serious consideration to actually forming a separate section. So um, uh, I have to go back into my background as to why I felt that it was timely to do this. I had previously been on multiple IEEE committees, activities. Um, I've been a section chair. I've been a region representative for many years. From there, I went on to the IEEE committees, two different committees that I was on. I was on the Life Members Committee for a couple of years, and when I came off of that, I went on to the committee called the Geographic Unit Operations Support Committee, otherwise known as GEOS. And in GEOS, we developed activities related to all aspects of geographic units worldwide. And so I was privy to that knowledge of that and how to form units, how to manage units, etc. So I had all this background knowledge um, of the experiences, and so I'm not sure what specifically triggered my interest in doing it at this time, other than the fact that I kind of felt like, hey, this is timely. for us to at least have a discussion on the topic of whether we should or should not form a separate section. So I reached out to the leadership here in the San Antonio area under Neil Smith, who was the vice president of the Central Texas section. He was the section representative here in San Antonio, and we put together a meeting at the barn door to have a discussion about the possibility of looking at other organizational structures for the San Antonio area. We looked into a subsection, and we also looked into forming our own section. So those were sort of the two options that we were looking at. And after we had the first section or this first meeting here in San Antonio, um, what came out of that is we agreed to have further meetings. And the next meeting, Walt Downing had invited us to go to Southwest Research
Mhm.
Institute to hold meetings there. So we began holding meetings there. And as we continued these meetings, it was more and more uh, supportive by those attending that we were really uh, moving towards forming our own section. And from there, uh, we put together a resolution, and that went around to all of the people who were attending the meetings. And the resolution basically said, hey, let's form our own section. And so that's how it got kicked off.
Okay, since that famous barn door restaurant meeting till, I don't want to say today, till recently, what's the timeline? How did this goes from the beginning? Can you give me a summary of the timeline of the establishment of the section?
Well, I'm not sure when that.
I'm sure I know there is a petition submitted to Fawzi Bahman after that. But after the petition, how did this go?
Well, I thought I had gone through that, but anyway,
Mhm.
from the original meeting, it was within weeks that we held the next meeting at Southwest Research Institute, and excuse me, we uh, we agreed to meet, I think, weekly until we came to the conclusion that we were going to move forward and submit the resolution. Um, After we prepared the resolution, and we got 12 signatures on the resolution. Um, Niels and I and Joe Redfield contacted the chairman of the Central Texas section, who was Fozzie Beeman at the time, and we requested a meeting with him. The three of us went up to San Marcos and had a nice meal with Fozzie and Bill Martino, as I remember. Um, and we basically laid it, all out that we were going to move forward and put forth the paperwork to create our own section. From that meeting in San Marcos, we began the actual processing of the documentation and the paperwork to move forward. The next step was, as we were doing that, is I contacted the region director, Bob Shapiro. I had a good long relationship with Bob. We knew each other very well, and I told Bob that we were moving in this direction, and Bob was supportive, and he said he would support us moving in that direction. One of the criteria of breaking off from a section is you must have the director's approval. So he gave us his approval, and we proceeded with the paperwork to submit our application to the MGA board. Uh, the lady that I knew up there, who had previously actually worked for me when I was a committee chair up at that IEEE level, Nicole Farmer, I started working with Nicole to see that we could, get this process, and we prepared the documents that she requested us to fill out, and that was the documentation that went before the MGA board for their next meeting, and it was on the agenda for that board meeting. And at that board meeting, it was submitted, and as soon as the agenda was considered, Bob Shapiro texted me, called me. I can't remember, but he called and or he let me know that uh, the agenda item for us forming our section was approved. And so once it,
I don't want to interrupt you, Scott. Do you remember dates for all these meetings? How earlier it was the before November 2019?
well, we started this back in early 2019, I think in the June time frame, if I remember
Okay.
correctly. But the dates don't stick in my head
It
that
took
well.
approximately.
But I would say that from June of 2019 onward, we were considering this, what we were going to do. By November and December, we had pretty well solidified what our position was going to be. And I don't remember the specific date of the board meeting, but it was, I think, in November. And because when the board took made the decision to allow us to set up our own section, um, it was on the 23rd of November. And the 23rd of November, I
Mm,
believe, was the date that the board actually met and approved our application. Uh,
mm,
I have something here that's kind of a keepsake item, and I may even have an extra one for you, but I'm going to hold
mm.
this up. You,
Okay, I love that.
you may or may not have seen this, but
No, I did not. No,
as soon
no.
as our section was formed, we wanted to capture that in some sort of a memento, and I suggested a cup, and we put the date of the organization of the Lone Star section on the cup. So we would always, and I ordered enough cups for every person who had actually signed the resolution, and then a couple more. So I still maybe have one or two of these available for you when.
Okay, I'll send you my address.
So
Yeah, I know you are good at this. Walt just shared with me the T-shirt you designed, for the I think the November the 5th anniversary celebration. I loved it. Thank you for doing this. Um, Scott, my understanding always the financial issues is the main challenge.
right.
You can split from other section. That's true. Like what Cliff told me, he has to still continue working with him for 2 months more until they find the replacement. So that can be solved. But how did the financial issues goes? I know you are the treasurer, so I'd like to hear from you. How did that goes?
Okay. Well, during the process of actually implementing the decision to form our own section, Fozzie Beeman, chair of the Central Texas section, and I worked very closely together. Fozzie drew up a transition document, and he spelled out the kind of things that he thought that we needed to consider. And I edited it, and we went back and forth several times until we had an agreement of how we would proceed. Uh, uh, since um, we had approximately 800 members in the area that was going to become the new Lone Star section. Um, we identified each person in the counties of Texas that the Lone Star section would consist of, and that was the approximate 800. And so, what we did for the finances that the Central Texas section held, we used the ratio of the 800 to the total, and gave us a percentage of the funds that the Central Texas section held. Once we agreed upon that number, I worked with Bill Martino, who was the treasurer of the Central Texas section, and we began transferring various funds over from the Central Texas section bank account to a new account that I had set up as treasurer of the Lone Star section. And so we began transitioning. We
My
transitioned.
understand my understanding there was another account for life member Infinity Group too, right?
Correct, and that caused some very difficult transition issues. But we first set up the new checking account for the Lone Star section, and we began transitioning funds into that. Since the Life Members Committee, or the Life Members Affinity Group that was already established here in San Antonio, uh, we had to transition over all of the chapters and transition over all of the student branches, and then transition over the financial aspects of that. And it took us several months to actually transition over the Life Members account. We actually had to close that account and open up a new account under the Lone Star section. And of course,
Who was doing this? Only you and Fauzi?
well, as far as the money, it was primarily myself and
Uh-huh.
Bill Martino.
Bill Martin.
He
Okay.
was he was treasurer of the Central Texas section. I was treasurer of the Lone Star section. I was also chair of the Life Members Affinity Group at that time. So I was also treasurer of the Lone Star Affinity Group. So I was deeply involved in all of those activities at that time. We ended up transitioning over $12,000 from
Mhm.
the Central Texas section financial accounts over to the Lone Star section. Some of those funds actually also rolled over into the Life Members Affinity Group as well. So the Life Members Affinity Group had some funds as well. And so that got us started as well. So uh, both organizations had sufficient funding to get started, and uh, we uh, commenced operations of the Lone Star section uh, by after we got all of the organizational units properly aligned under the Lone Star section, and we got the financial aspects all transitioned over, we began full operations under the Lone Star section. Um, and we,
Everything, do you mind if I ask? Everything was smooth, no argument, no discussion, everything was smooth.
it went fairly smoothly, I would say.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
We had discussions, and we were both responsible in our deliberations. We worked with each other very, successfully. No arguments of any substance, and so no, it went very well.
Good, good. I'm glad it did. I'm glad it did. Usually the starting is the hardest part, Scott. We did the split. How did it go in the first couple of years?
I'm sorry. How did it go? When?
How did things go in the first 2 years? We started with 800 members.
Well,
So we have to tell, yeah, go ahead.
it was slow getting started because all of a sudden the section was now the primary organizational structure that had various chapters underneath them, had four student branches underneath them. So we began having XCOM meetings right away, and where we discussed our activities and what we would pursue. We tended to follow the the processes that the Central Texas section had used very successfully over the years, and that is having both a spring planning meeting as well as a fall planning meeting each year. And though because this all happened in November and December of 2019, I think we did hold our first spring planning meeting in the next few months. And so that got our organization sort of operationally active at that time. And so we knew who the chairs were for the various chapters, and we reached out and
And Neil Smith was the first chair.
I'm sorry.
Neil Smith was the first chair, right?
Right. At our first XCOM meeting after we were approved as a section, uh, I made the announcement that I was not interested in becoming chair of the section. I had been a chair previously, and I thought it best to. My forte primarily was financial, so I wanted to stick with, working with what I knew best, and that was the financial aspects of the IEEE. And Niels said, "Well, I'd be the chair." So we said, "Hey, that's fine." Um, Ernest, I was listening to his oral history, and he says I prompted him, but that's not the way I remember it. I remember I remember him saying, "I might as well volunteer because I'm going to otherwise I'm going to get appointed anyway." But Ernest took on the role of secretary,
Secretary,
and
yeah.
Walt was sitting next to me, and he made the comment. He says, "Well, is there a role for me?" And I said, "Why don't you become the vice chair?" And
Uh-huh.
he says, "Okay." And so that's how it all happened. We just sort of chit chatted and all agreed that this is going to be our structure. And in our spring planning meeting, we announced that these were the officers that were slated to become officers of the new Lone Star
Uh,
section, and we got
I
thumbs
want
up.
to I want to comment here that everybody is listening to this now. How easy things are in San Antonio. We get together, we go to a restaurant, we see the conversation with Walt, and we solve things easily and friendly. I love that part. There's no formal, no argument all the time.
Well, when we look back at the original, discussions of whether to form a section or not, we had to look at who our volunteers were. We had
Mhm.
Joe Redfield, who had been a former chair of the Central Texas section. We had Ernest Frankie, who had been a former chair of the Central Texas section. We had Garrett Polhamus, former chair of the Central Texas section, and myself, former chair of the Central Texas section. And then, of course, Niels served 2 years as vice president of the Central Texas section. Uh, plus, we had duplicate chapters. We had a duplicate computer chapter. We had a duplicate Life Members Affinity Group. We had a duplicate uh, of a lot of the various, technical chapters. So we were fairly well already autonomous in our, operations here. So um, uh, we had all of the support that a new section could ever hope to have. I mean, we had the talent, we had the volunteers, we had the experience. So moving into operations as a new section was really very smoothly, went very smoothly. So,
I love that. I love that. I have a question about the name. We are supposed to be named San Antonio section, which
well,
makes sense.
yeah, that was the name that kind of was on the plate. But when we started filling out the application for the MGA to approve our section, uh, we were kind of talking about the name, and we had used the word San Antonio section because that's the way a lot of sections are named, is by the city of where they're located.
or the
Um,
Alamo or something like this.
but Walt says we needed something a little bit more, you know, different, something that stood out a little bit more. And he was the one who suggested Lone Star Section, and everybody said, "Yeah, that's a good name. Let's go with
Yeah.
that one."
How did the Central Texas section react to that, to choosing that name?
Well, that's
Don't
kind of
worry about politics. Let's just tell the story.
a there were a couple of individuals, and I'm not going to name names, who
No, no names.
thought that was inappropriate name, and they bent the ear of Bob Shapiro, the region director, on that topic, and so there was some pushback relative to the name Lone Star Section. But over the succeeding months, when I met with those gentlemen up in the Austin area, uh, we had a frank discussion about this, and we basically got over the disagreement that brought up.
I'm glad we did. Yeah, yeah. Walt loves this name. I can see that. Um, my next question about data point. I can't leave this conversation without mentioning data point. Of course, we have other inventions in San Antonio. Why it's relevant to our technology advancement in San Antonio? Why it's important? Already, we took this. We were nominated to Stepstone, and we are thinking now to work with Region 5 History Committee for the milestone of the IEEE. So what's going on about the data points? Could you brief everybody about it, why it's
Well,
important
yeah.
for us?
Well, in of course Ernest's history recording, he talked about getting together with David Monroe. And
Mhm.
as we were, as Ernest and I and Garrett Polhamus and I don't know, Joe Redfield, maybe, I can't remember all of the names or the players, but we began holding meetings with David Monroe out at the SAMSAT facility, which was undergoing, building, and because of my experience with the Life Members Committee, where we approved various projects, I suggested that we do a project for the History Museum. And so, as we were going through the discussions and preparing the document, the application for that, uh, we had a lot of time working with David Monroe, and we became familiar with Data Point. Uh, Now, here's something that I brought up that was kind of interesting to the rest of them. I actually worked for Data Point
You
myself.
did.
Yes, I did.
I did
And
not know
so
that.
I told David, I said, David, I said, I worked for Data Point for a short period of time. I was just a part-time employee. And I got a really funny story I could tell you about my experience with
We
working
have
for
to, we
Data
have
Point.
10
We'll
minutes.
save that for another day. But
Okay. Yeah.
but
Yeah, you can
but
tell
you
very briefly, very quickly. You can do that because I want to use the 10 minutes really to for you to address the young professional student chapters. It's very important to hear from the main lead engineer behind the
yeah.
section and what's his expectation from him and from the section.
Well, how the Life Members Committee, or Life Members Affinity Group here, really got into this is our vice chair of the LMAG, uh, uh, Larry Higgins, knew Lamont Wood, and he suggested that we have him come over and make a presentation to us. And so he came over, and of course, he wrote the book called Data Point, and he made this
But by
present.
the way, thank you. Thank you for introducing me to him. He was very helpful, very
Oh
helpful. I
yes.
talked to him a few times. Yeah. Yeah.
So through his presentation, we became very familiar with the fact that the data point 2200 was unique and possibly qualified as a first desktop personal computer, and so that kicked off this concept of what we might do with this knowledge, and we Ernest and I and others began working with David to see what we
Mhm.
could do. And so we wrote up uh, stepping stone award. It's a Region 5 award, of which I also was the original coordinator on that award. So I knew all about that award. And so we wrote up an application for the Region 5 to approve the data point 2200 as the first desktop personal computer. We ran that through the Region History Committee, Zafar Taqui, and of course, I'm on the Region 5 History
Mhm.
Committee, so I worked with Zafar on preparing that. And we ultimately got it approved by the Region 5
Mhm.
XCOM. And then we
Mhm.
prepared the award ceremony here in San Antonio out at SAMSAT, which turned out to be a very successful activity. And
Yeah, thank you for sharing the pictures with me. Thank you so much.
okay,
Scott, I have a few minutes. I'll let you address everybody. Talk to everybody in the section.
I'm sorry.
Talk to everybody, address them. What's your message for everybody at the section, especially the young professional?
Well, I would say to the section folks who view this video that it gives them the opportunity to pull the curtains back and see what really happened in terms of our becoming our own section. So historically, I think this is important to be captured. And as you know, I collected a lot of the history of the origin
You
of the
do.
section because I knew one of these days it was might be of interest to somebody. So
For me, you are treasure.
so I'm thankful that you have come on as the historian, and I support you and all
It's
you want to
pleasure.
do
I know. Thank you.
for the history of the section. I would love to see more oral histories of members of the section put on the
We
section website.
we
So,
are getting everybody. We are getting Neil Smith. We are getting David Moore. We are everybody. We are getting them.
right.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you for the support you are providing for our committee and for everybody in San Antonio. I want them to know how big things you are doing for them. Thank you so much.
Well, you're quite welcome, and just call on me anytime I can be of
I will.
assistance.
And expect me to schedule another part two of this interview.
Okay, are we concluding?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to
Yes. Thank
turn
you
the
so much.